首先这里说一下两件事情。第一件事情呢，我们现在这个书生智乐经呢，还有可能6堂课吧，明天没有，后天、大后天、星期4和星期5都有，然后再下个礼拜讲4节课的话，基本上已经圆满了。然后我这边的这个今年的课程呢，也算是圆满了。在这个过程当中呢，我们的这个包括这个摄像的也好，还有官家也好，还有我们这边的成功师的导游们都很辛苦。导师也可以说，但是不知道最后一天就不一定这么说吧，我就提前就说一下，就是特别感谢你们啊，尤其是今年是一个特殊的这个事件吧，就我们这个每次的是官家这边呢也是面对很多问题，但总体上是讲现在呢算可能要接近尾声啊，就这一段时间的话呢，我想大家这个我们山沟里面的这些导游呢，不管是谁，大家都很珍惜，就很认真，这一点也是个很好的事啊，就这是我想讲一下第一件事情。然后第二件事情呢，那个从明天开始的话呢，我们一般暂时我们立定一个礼拜当中的话呢，可能如果有一些新的这个女课也好，出家人、在家人，入班也好，入教室的话，那就是新来的这些都不允许，因为最近在成都呢，就是主要是最近啊，就是大概1个礼拜吧，我们先实施一下1个礼拜，因为最近成都的话，那就是可能，虽然人数不多，就只是2、3个人，但是呢，可能就说的比较多一点儿，这样的话呢，就是包括现在4大县的话呢，也是非常重视起来了，就是包括下面428那个卡呢，就是管得很严，然后我们这个罗入下面的那个就山门，就是在那里的话呢，一方面要这个什么那个刷身份证还有那个就是几乎那个外面的这些人的话呢，就是不让进来，就是这一段时间，其实这样的话也可能会好一点，就因为我们这里面就是不管是哪个班里面，或者是哪个我们经堂当中的话呢，就是如果发现的话呢，那大家都不得了，就是虽然就是自己没有得病，但是也照样的就是受很长时间的痛苦，所以你们也可能看到这个新闻吧，就是发现现在那个成都，就以前是叫郫县，现在是那个郫都区，就是这个郫县和成都，这个名字取得怪怪的，就是那这样的话，成都都给其他地方都要加这样的名字。不知道什么原因，那个区的话，那就是发现就激励嘛，但其中有一个的话呢，他又要去什么春熙路，又要去好几次酒吧，就是又要去这个地铁站，就是还有特别那个他去什么那个郫县医院啊，还有那个他们经常去的有一些公园，就是他那个公园里面呢，包括这个藏族人也比较多数的，我们色达这边的好多的那个藏族就是有些退休生啊，有些稍微有一点条件的，他们在卖那个郫县和温江，还有那个这个都江堰啊，就那一带的这个卖房子，然后最近呢，就是他们都就现在纷纷的往回来，就是因为去年就封城嘛，就是所以他们今年也可能这样担心，但最近我看到那个这个。就是这个政府这边的话呢，一直说没事，就是这个事情是一个很小的事情，即使得的话呢也没啥，就是像感冒一样的。 如果是真的感冒一样的话倒好，但是呢，不知道怎么样，就是所以我们这边的话呢，就是因为那边的这个一上来的话呢，可能这个不知道我们出家人和拉拢这边的多不多，就凡是在郫县和那一带的话呢，就这边的这个人呢就比较多的，就是以前都是这样的，所以这次从那边过来的话呢，就是还是需要就是谨慎。然后我们这边的话呢，第一个是。可能我们内部的不管是餐厅也好，这个商店也好，这个宾馆也好，就是大家本来我们这边也是什么消毒啊，就是测温啊，还有那个洗漱啊，就是这些方面都在重视当中嘛。但可能现在要更加这个注意。然后第二个的话呢，就是他们先生呢。也说是这个暂时可能在这个山门当中的话呢，就是外来的人不会放了，就不会上就放进来，就是这也是很好。第三个的话呢，他们说那个最近那个有一些东江的这个有一些食品也好，这些都是从山门当中不允许上来，就是这个包括我们的有一些什么餐厅啊、商店呢，就这些的话呢，你们也要注意一下，不然的话。大家都知道，就是那个冷冻的这个食品的话呢，就是在大城市里面，就是经常也是，甚至你这个食物没有吃，但是借助的话呢，就是也有一些这个就是这个病毒的啊，就所以最近呢，可能是在大概1个礼拜左右的话呢，就是有一些货要上来的话呢，可能又要去这个观察，就是同时的话呢，就是也要。注意一下，就是这个事情，然后一个是人，一个是车，还有他们这个上来的一些，包括有一些病人也好，其他人的话呢，虽然是原来是佛学院的，但是最近在那边待的话呢，可能我们这边还是要控制一下好啊，就是这样的话，那么我们从明天开始的话呢，就是原有的这些道友以外的话呢，最好是这个有一些这个回来的或者是新来的这些的话呢，都一律不要这个进这个大大小小的进堂啊，就是否则的话呢，到时候也确实是。可能在这里呢，就是比较麻烦的，就是这是我们从自身来讲呢，暂时这样的话，我想呢，就也许可能他们成都这边的话呢，就是做一些排查，就是然后过了以后呢，可能过了1个礼拜左右，就是就像以前那个什么这个蒙古啊，就是还有上海啊，还有什么那个包括这个青岛啊，就是像这些一样的，就是也许可能过一段时间没有什么，大家也不用特别的紧张啊，就是是不是疫情到了门口了，就是也不用这么想，但是呢，也不要掉以轻心，就因为有时候的话呢，就是今年是大家也知道是一个特别就是不平凡的一年，就是所以我们自己也是真的能活到明年的话呢，也不好说，就是每个人都是有里里外外的好多的因缘了。最近好像印度那边的话呢，又就是出现一个比较奇怪的这个病啊，就凡是今年就是很多的这个往年是很平常的一件事情，今年的话呢，就是也可以看出来，就是好多都是就是比较这个特别，就是在这个时候的话呢，如果没有特殊情况的话，那就是大家也尽量的，就不要这个接触很多人啊。就我也就是就除了上课以外的话呢，就是不接触人，就是这个路上都是很多人当着的话说，我不知道以后再说，以后再说，我就这样跑。因为以后再说的话，就稍微对方也是好一点嘛，就是就这样的，就是所以说我也现在那个就只有这样，就是除此之外不讲课也不行的，这个事情呢，就是跟大家说一下啊，就是那么从明天开始呢，就是大家也不用特别的那个，但是呢还是要注意一下，就是然后同时自己呢，我都是经常忘，就是所以我说说你们的话呢，可能也不太好，但是最好是这个洗漱啊，就这些，理论上是我懂，但是实际行动当中是我这个系数还是比较糟糕的，但就不得不说，对吧？就是，你看这节目做的你们上，做的我们全部那个叫的，包括当个咱都什么都，东巴都接讲了，给上咱的就是我在你讲工资，这我都就相当于哪么，就没帮做上了说了。 공주 도반보를 신지로 공주 도반보를 신지로 공주 도반보를 신지로
The answer path, profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all beings and thus generate the supreme bodhicitta.
도적 방장 제당 라방네 남절 찾는 던저 만에데 데네 데라 조장 데라 바바 니바티나 가브르시드면 여 고통 교통 대비진 남도 바 너덕 탐진 던저 남네 숑 그냥보 메pen 듯이 습시 바 너는 랑롱 너는 랑롱 쇼장 너는 랑롱 쇼장 마듬 인 시바 등는 직된 마바가 시바 대동 축국담네 냠 제당 페르진 남도 시장치 니바티나 텔라 마차소 릭바마야 마와 가키네 게르롱 투바 넘버는 페르면 게르 데스타베나 머리 스마트폰 라 추라 따다 가와 토브르지 샹치 문버름 도시르 나리 나이나 랑가 양락 똥니 덥당 랑가 양락 란똥니 덥당 추년베 추년베나 나라 옴메나 데라 추년 바라 교르인저 데라 데다 추년 바나 교르인저 츠즈바이 츠스잡비시르 나는 총마버다 가마케르 제트뜨글라 롱슈도 녜르뽕나 케바 찌르뜨르 추는 년마시드 르그머 마당 담바만 마와 르나바건데 용서 방으로샤 까르와 갑적 떠머 깡콤바 추지 담바 데라 갑기 지 다란도바 윤던 동니르벤 직든샤와 용습 자르마셔 강직 제당 꾸지 돈점도도 되는 축동 소르 흑바문 흑마연 강직 저정 게르롱 럭버고 단양 어당기 스르쇼 득버기 메이르 네퍼 라쿤 니르지 찌글락 찌그나 추지 담이야샤 롱노드 카톤 샤동 상탄 나마 추지 кар부 쇼놈 베르게르담 가르테 쿄드는 도드나 저버기 촐라 덩드 스캅나 예버기 데비전 셔밤 닝 용데니 땀바 넘버는 직버린 여러하나 게르롱도는 신도 고장 칸 곰바 워네 던즈 가버린 여 니바도는 데비전 제체트 닌덤 산더 서양 땀시드 쉐드 땀시라 시바도는 뉴룩 저나양 로도 게버 물물 미바른 여 시반도도 근더 랍도 냠 안송 안죽 숨도 조르르기 가단 가와타는 무바케니 경 세르 타버 딱도 너그니 기 용던 도파 너그나 네바이 파르 가버 쭌라 딱마샤 파르 딱거 쭌라 딱마샤 당네 캬브람 박정 당축지 대님 또는 샘킷 머샤 대님 또는 샘킷 머샤고 정도 버메트 근지 사와테 게르노 말라 니브르 용머샤 후카르와치 그 타르와 톱만 여러 너너탄바 너라 고름 연 데티 게르노 용던 도지르바 화우 머르 주파 파네 장 가jam가와 랍터 가와이 세른 자르 군 곰바라우네 샤테니 좀든데 지상주 상화 쳔보 데니 좀든데 랍상주 상화 쳔보 샴베 너크지 소르도 좀든데 너터 카루 추 용서 뽕위 쳇던 던저 nom바 몽부 쫀 차장 용던 맘치 발락 노파당 단데 던저 뇨몽반 페르르 get장 숏바 잠보 말락 바노 곰처 락데 좀든데 샹치 선화ම් 케바 게바 차르와 스지크 치그브르 가발라 곰버 가버 머브게드 좀든데 샹치 선화 샹치 선화 메발라 가비 쫀놈 찌르터 떡버 게 샹치 선화 강 토나 돈 넘버 돈을 남발라 가장 돈라 똑베 용소 돈을 만저와 라 데르크치 소라탄 좀든데 샹치 선화 케베 게완 차르와 스지크 치브르 가발라 곰버 가버 머브게
Well, let us continue with the class on the Sutra on generating the supreme aspiration of Bodhisattva. This sutra, I think it's a pithy instruction, especially to the beginners. For the beginners of Buddhists, the beginner monastics, the beginner renunciates, this sutra contains lots of pithy instructions for these group of beginners. Because the sutra talks a lot about the obstacles that one may encounter on the path. Yesterday we talked about the 22 faults one can find in gaining benefits or offerings, and 20 faults that can be found in distractions. Let's see. Later, we'll also learn about the 20 types of faults one can find in the worldly speech. Worldly speech, such as flattery and frivolous speech that is non-Dharma related. And then later on, we're going to learn the 20 types of faults that can be found in indulging in sleep. And then 20 types of faults that can be found in spending time in chores. And then 20 types faults that can be found in frivolous actions. So in this sutra, once you finish studying this sutra, those of you who, in fact, we will be able to understand what the beginners should do. There are about over 100 types of dharmas that one should practice. According to Tibetan, the Tibetan version, there are about 50, and then the later part has about 90. So altogether are 140 according to the Tibetan version, and all of those are going to be taught in the sutra. So these are really the guidelines for our actions, or the kind of regulations or guidelines that we can know what are the actions that we should adapt and what are the actions that we should abandon. I really hope every one of you could see yourself as a beginner. When Pontsog Rinpoche was giving the teaching, we were studying it very diligently, and however, I think we didn't really remember that much, or we didn't really keep that much of notes. But this time, restudying it, I really hope many of us would be able to restudy this class well, so that you will spend more time on it, and I really hope that you can take the time to review it after class as well, because you can't just listen to it during class and then completely give it up after class. Because whenever I give classes, my state fluctuates. Sometimes I get too tired, and I don't really have much energy, or maybe my health is not that great. Sometimes I do feel very content about my performance in teaching, and then when I go back, I feel quite happy about it. And sometimes when I don't give a good teaching, I really want to punish myself, but I don't know how to. Anyhow, even if I punish myself, what good would that do to all of you? So I really encourage you to review it yourself afterwards. Now let's continue to talk about the verses that's taught by the Buddha on the 20 faults. That's the 20 faults related to gaining offerings. Now the Buddha started to speak in verses, saying that if one were to give up all the desire and aggression, as well as not dwell in neurotic entertainment and distraction, it would be the best not to dwell in those chaotic or such kind of places that harbor too much neurosis and distractions. If one were to focus on focusing on forsake desire, anger, and distraction, then this person will not create those faults anymore, will not generate such misdeeds. There are people, of course, who may appear to live in quiet places. But even in quiet places, people can still engage in 8 worldly dharmas. According to Sakya Pandita, he also said that there are practitioners who practice in quiet and secluded places who tend to be very coarse still. According to Radhakuta Sutra, it says that there are people who would abide in mountains and forests, but still seek for companionship. Some people would give up their miraculous powers and eloquence as well as their wisdom in order to gain the worldly fame as well as retinues. If they were to do so, then such kind of person would definitely be reborn in the 3 lower realms, or at least reborn in poverty. So we can see that there are people who would stay or live in the secluded areas in the mountains or forests, but their focus or their motivation of doing so is to use that as a method to gain more benefits. And there are people, though, living in secluded areas, but their minds are very distracted. Especially, I think nowadays, during this information era, you could be living here, but you can still use internet to contact the world that's full of distractions through cell phone, through internet. And it's very easy to practice all the 8 worldly dharmas nowadays, more than ever. So if these kind of people living, though they may be living in secluded areas that's favorable to practice, but it is really not meaningful. And later, the Buddha said that if people live in this kind of environment that's full of distractions, what are the faults that may generate? That is arrogance and deluded thoughts, dualistic thoughts. And the distractions or neurotic environment would also destroy the people without discipline, or people without discipline. They really love those kind of noisy and entertainment places, such as Disney World and all the touristy place that's called Shambhala. Nowadays they have the places that's called Shangri-La. So to lure people into for tourism. But all those kind of tourism could give food to the gaining of desire, anger, and ignorance. I think maybe because of the pandemic, it really gives the time and space for people to calm down a bit. Otherwise, people would be very distracted in this whole world. For example, during the pandemic, I was living in Chengdu, and whenever I lived there, every Friday night, I don't see any lights during night because everyone would be out on the streets, so they're not home yet. But this time, in the pandemic period, everyone's rooms are lit up. But though they're at home, maybe their minds are not at home. Sometimes big disasters, big changes would encourage people to contemplate what is more important. Especially, I think majority of human beings are very arrogant and have lots of dualistic thoughts. But those kind of actions are very different than the genuine practitioners. The genuine practitioners are the ones who have meditative absorption. They know what they should do. They know what should be done. So the beginners, they should rather live in secluded and quiet places rather than in the neurotic environments or that's full of distractions. Whenever you have the power, whenever the beginners started to practice more and have a stability to liberate sentient beings, then you can get into those environments to liberate others. Now, to continue, the Buddha said then, the fools really love talking about the worldly theories, which would lead one to regress from the most supreme truth. And so people really love talking about war and all the different family affairs, but they don't really like to talk about truth. And people talk about economy and talk about psychology, talk about military and different strategies. But if you were to habituate yourself with all of those kind of worldly theories, then you would not be able to listen to or would not be able to understand the meaning of the truth. And then it says that one who indulge in dualistic thoughts are not the practice that should be done by the beginners either. Bhikshus would give up on extensive listening and studying. Their speech would not be in accord with the Dharma. Their meditative absorption would decrease. And then slowly, their speech would not be proper. Their meditative absorption would not progress because they don't have time to practice meditation every day. They would only have a few moments a day to practice. So slowly and slowly, they would only think about the worldly theories. After grasping onto the worldly theories and the worldly affairs, when can one truly gain peace? Life is really short. It's already really short. Then if you don't spend much time on your practice, if you were to spend time on chatting with the others and dealing with all the chores of life, you may not even get the time or opportunity to practice the 5 practices of Nodro. At the end of life, you realize you just maybe took refuge in Buddhism, but never really engaged in practice. It is just like you went to a treasure island but came back empty-handed. If one's mind is constantly distracted, such person would be far apart from the right view. Let it be bodhicitta or let it be compassion. So one would completely forget about them very quickly or be very far away from those kind of right view. But in such kind of distraction, the person would swiftly lose pure action. One indulge in a neurotic environment would forget about all kinds of rules or regulations. Maybe at first it's their appearance. They would lose the kind of appearance of the monastics. At first, a pure monk who gets into the world, they would wear the proper monastic robes. And then, after a little while, after they slowly get tinted by this worldly view, they would start wearing T-shirts, and they would start changing their robes, and slowly their hair grow out, and they would completely blend into this world. So let it be the monastics or the lay practitioners. It's really important to dress or take care of your appearance so that it is in accord with the Dharma. Otherwise, you would slowly blend into this world without even knowing it. If you were to spending a lot of time in a distracted environment, then your values and your faith may be stripped clean. So over here, the Buddha said that the people who stay in distracted places, they will then slowly lose their admiration towards the Buddha, towards the noble Sangha, and they would also abandon the Dharma that leads to freedom, that's parting from desire. People who stay in such kind of environment would slowly grasp onto the non-dharmic speech. Whatever they speak of, whatever they think of, the theories that they enjoy all become the worldly speech and theories. So they slowly blend into the worldly view and completely lose their dharmic view, the right view. So over here, it talks about how distraction could create the negative influence upon the monastics and renunciates, especially to the beginners. Usually, it is very difficult not to receive any negative influence from the environment. Therefore, as a beginner, before your practice and view stabilize, you should try to stay and practice at quiet places, at secluded places, according to the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. It also talks about one should part from one's own hometown. That's a practice of Bodhisattvas, because the so-called hometowns could be the place where it would generate lots of desire and aggression, as well as ignorance. Whenever you go to a place, an unknown place, a secluded place, then the mind that grasps towards the 8 worldly dharmas would also decrease. Also, on top of that, if you can practice the ascetic practices and practice with the diligence, you would definitely be able to study and gain the correct dharma. In the history, many great masters and many dharma practitioners, they also would consider this is one of the most important ways of seeking for the correct dharma. This is really important. But of course, there's another possibility. As I said earlier, there are people who turn or transform the secluded practice environment into an environment that is full of distractions as well. There are Sangha members over here who would invite one for lunch and invite another for dinner, hosting parties all day long. And this is really not done in the appropriate extent. It is fine when you're doing this in the appropriate extent. But if you were to have this kind of parties, this kind of maintaining this kind of interpersonal relationships every day in restaurants, this is really inappropriate. Our staff members sometimes would notice, oh, this person would come over very often, but this person would also come over to have lunch or dinner with different people every day. This person must be really rich. I'm not saying that we should abandon that completely, but I'm saying that everything should be done in appropriation. So there are opportunities where you can have gatherings with your Dharma masters and your fellow Sangha members, your friends. maybe once or twice a year, that is fine. You shouldn't fall into the extreme of not talking to anyone at all and try to run away from the other people at all times. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good practitioner. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that you should try to maintain interpersonal relationships all the time with each other, which creates lots of distraction towards practice. To continue, the Buddha then said, I have continuously given up thousands of bodies and limbs and heads as well as eyes for thousands of times for the persuasion of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, the supreme Dharma, for the persuasion of the supreme Dharma. He didn't seek for other goals. He had given up his bodies for the persuasion of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Listening to the Dharma without impatience. He's constantly with the insatiable mind to seek for the correct Dharma. He had given up his body to seek for the correct Dharma without any impatience or regret or brokenheartedness. I think we should also learn from the World Honored One. We should develop such kind of spirit of seeking for the Dharma at any cost. There's a story that's included in the Parinirvana Sutra. The Chinese version, in terms of the translation, Master Faxian translated in a slightly different title, but the content is the Parinirvana Sutra. Around the North Liang dynasty, that is about 400 CE, during the fractured time of China before the unification of China, when there were about 16 states. In the state of Beiliang, or during the time of that, it was translated, and that translation was easier to understand. And later on, there was another translation of Nirvana Sutra as well. But in the Tibetan version, the Parinirvana Sutra is not complete. The Chinese version is more complete. Anyhow, in this sutra, it included a story of the Buddha when he was seeking or trying to learn the Dharma during the causal stage. It says that there was once a world called Saha world, and also a Buddha whose name is the same as the Shakyamuni Buddha. At that time, that Shakyamuni Buddha was giving the teaching of Parinirvana Sutra. In fact, at that time, the Shakyamuni Buddha of our time was born as a poor person, but he had lots of yearning to seek for the correct Dharma. So after heard the news that this Buddha was giving teaching of Parinirvana Sutra, he really wanted to receive this teaching, but he was really poor, so he didn't have anything to offer to this Buddha. After deep contemplation, he thought that the best this kind of Dharma deserves to the kind of offering that is most supreme. I should sell my body so that I can make offering. So he tried to sell his body. At that time, he met this sick person, this person who's very ill, and part of the prescription to cure his illness was to eat about a few grams of the human flesh from the alive person. If that could be satiated, then he would give this poor person 5 golden coins, and he agreed. So after giving his flesh, he took this money to the Buddha and then listened to Parinirvana Sutra. Also, during that time, that poor person was rather quite dull in his capacity, so he couldn't really remember lots of the verses that's taught by that Buddha. And he only ended up remembering only one verse, and that verse says, the Tathagata had fully attained parinirvana and would be able to eradicate birth and death. If one were to listen with wholeheartedness, one would be able to attain immeasurable bliss. He remembered this verse and he kept on chanting it while continuously to sell his flesh from his body. After a month, this sick person, this ill person also got well. So he himself, this poor person, because his motivation was very pure, his body recovered. And then he generated bodhicitta, made the aspiration that when he attained enlightenment, his name would also be Shakyamuni Buddha. So that's the story from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. This is such a great story. We can see that the world-honored one, when he was at the causal stage, in order to liberate the sentient beings of the 3,000-fold world, he had given his body to the sentient beings in order to receive the genuine truth from the correct Dharma. Nowadays, as the followers of the Buddha who are receiving the truth that's taught by the Buddha, we should have this kind of gratification. Sometimes I think about Ponsokro Rinpoche when he was young. If he did not seek for the Dharma after going through so much hardship, we would not be able to have such kind of opportunity to listen to Dharma. And these causes and conditions are so incredible. Ponsokro Rinpoche also had a similar story, though Ponsokro Rinpoche said that he didn't give up his flesh, but I think the spirit of seeking for the correct Dharma is just like that. When Ponsokro Rinpoche was 18 or 19, at that time he traveled with a fellow practitioner named Tripa to Sershu. In fact, his Lama at that time, Lama Ika, asked him to go to Sershu to rely on Toga Rinpoche. So that's why he traveled. It was really cold at night in winter, and they only carried a little bit of provision. They would beg for alms and then continue to travel to Sershu. In fact, it's quite far away from Garze to Sershu. It took a long time. There was once Ponsokro Rinpoche and Drupa arrived at a small monastery located around the East Valley. At that time, Drupa was then started making tea, and they're going to have a slight snack over there, mixing tea and tsampa over there. And then Ponsokro Rinpoche got interested in the debate that was going on within the small monastery. And Ponsokro Rinpoche joined the debate, also won the debate. The monastics, the monks over there inside the monastery were not very happy about Ponsokro Rinpoche's winning. Maybe at that time Ponsokro Rinpoche showed lots of pride. Anyhow, it ended up becoming a fight because the monks over there started hitting them with the rocks. So Ponsokro Rinpoche at that time ran with Drupa, and they ended up not having anything eaten over there. Unlike how nowadays we have some blankets and we travel with hats and have different jackets, and we have those heating pads and all of those things. At that time, in fact, they have to sleep on the just in the wild, in the opens. So it was really cold. But Pontsuk Rinpoche, because he practiced Zalong, and he wasn't cold at all, but Drupa was. And Drupa, because he was cold, Pontsuk Rinpoche gave him his belt to cover. And then his belt was really warm, so that's how Drupa survived those cold nights. In fact, from Gardze to Sersho, it's quite far away, especially back then. The Sersho County does not have lots of good infrastructures. So Pontsuk Rinpoche, when he went there, he didn't really take anything with him. He just took maybe a little bit of tsampa, and sometimes he would boil some water and mix with tsampa. And in the summer, they can get a little bit of the yak milk yogurt, and that's it. Toga Rinpoche asked them to make yogurt offerings, and that was the best kind of offerings they can offer at that time. Pontsuk Rinpoche also digged out a cave around the mountains with the fellow Sangha members, and they would practice over there. That's how they lived for 6 years during the study in Sersho County. Nowadays, when we think back about the lifestyle Pontsuk Rinpoche had to live back then, it's so unimaginable, and it almost sounds like a legend that happened a long, long time ago. In fact, we also practiced in quite hard conditions compared to all of you that's enjoying the Dharma teachings right now. But compared to Pontsuk Rinpoche and the previous masters, in fact, what we had to endure was nothing compared to any of them. Let it be for the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and the previous masters, their ascetic practices to receive the Dharma teachings are very inspiring. According to the Sutra of Bodhisattva's life, it talked about how a king wanted to receive the genuine Dharma, and at that time, because he couldn't, therefore he announced in front of all of his ministers. He said that whomsoever can give me the teaching of the correct Dharma of the truth, then I will offer a generous amount of wealth. On top of that, you can even replace me as the king of this country. So the ministers went around the country and started to look for someone who can teach the genuine Dharma. And then they found a Brahmin who apparently has those teachings. The king was very happy about that. So he prostrated in front of that Brahmin and asked him to give him the teaching. But the Brahmin said, well, it's not going to be that easy. I spent lots of time and went through lots of hardship in order to receive the genuine Dharma. If you really want to receive genuine Dharma, then you have to cut 1,000 holes on your body, to carve out 1,000 holes on your body and make offering of lamps inside those flesh-made holes. And then I will give you the teaching of the Dharma. At that time, the king thought about it, and he started thinking about in the beginningless time, from the beginningless time in the samsara, he had given up innumerable bodies, and this time he would give it up for the gaining of the correct Dharma, which is really meaningful. Therefore, he started carving his own flesh. At that time, all of his retinue and ministers were all crying and begging the king not to do that. But the king started consoling them, saying that, well, from the beginningless samsara, I have given up so many lifetimes and so many flesh bodies, and those were not of intrinsic meaning. Those were all squandered. Therefore, this time I'm giving up my body in order to receive the genuine Dharma. It is meaningful not only to me, but it will bring light to all of you. Whenever I become enlightened and attain Buddhahood, I will come and liberate all of you. So that may the light of wisdom shine on all of your body. At At that time, then the Brahmin agreed to give teachings, and the king started carving and started to pour the lamp oil and lit his body as a lamp. So the Brahmin couldn't say no anymore, therefore he started giving teaching to this king. This king said, "Before I light my body, can you please give me the teaching so that I may die after hearing the teaching and I won't regret it at all?" So the Brahmin started giving him the teaching that has only 4 verses, where it says that what is born will die, what has been gathered will be dispersed, what has been accumulated will be exhausted, and what has been high will be brought to low. Upon receiving this teaching, the king then lit his body with 1,000 lamps. And not only he didn't feel regret, he was extremely happy that he received the genuine teaching of the Dharma. The king, after making offering of the lamps, I think he died. In fact, the king was the previous life of the Buddha when he was practicing in the causal stage. And the Brahmin who gave teaching to the Buddha at that time was the previous life of Devadatta. I think Devadatta and the king definitely has some different connections for lifetimes. Devadatta manifested in such a way that he had lots of aggression and tried to harm the Buddha. This story was recorded in the Sutra of the Lives of Bodhisattva. The translation of the Chinese version, in fact, was translated by an unknown author or unknown translator. There were about over 10 stories that's included in the sutra. Stories on the previous lives of the Buddha when he was practicing at the causal stage. In fact, not only we can receive one verse of teaching or one stanza of teaching, we are receiving many verses of teachings right now. We can definitely look at them and see its true values. The value of those teachings are extremely precious. We have to cherish them and look at it if all of those teachings would be beneficial to all of us. Look at the simple teaching that is just of 4 verses, but the Buddha, in fact, sacrificed his body at that time to gain. It's very simple. It just says, what is born will die, what has been gathered will be dispersed. Such simple teaching, if it was not gained and preserved and passed down, then we would not be able to have them. This kind of truth, if we do not preserve them, then we will be at a great loss. Such kind of truth is pursued by the wise ones. And the wise ones would not be contented with a little bit of the teachings. And to continue, the Buddha said that, but for those ones who do not take delight in the truth, they would listen a little bit and then they would discard the teachings. The Buddha then said that when I was a king in the past, in order to receive a teaching of the 4 verses, I've made generous offering of wife and wealth. I've given up everything in order to just gain 4 verses worth of the teaching of the Dharma. There's a sutra named the Sutra requested by the wondrous form king. Whenever you have time, I really encourage you to read that. There's one stanza that's quite well known, and I've quoted it many times. It says that love leads to sorrow, love leads to fear. If thou dost keep away from love, trouble thee not, could both sorrow and fear. When you do not have love, all the fear and sorrow would not appear, would not occur at all. Nowadays, lots of worldly movies, they would quote from this sutra as well and use this. this particular verse to describe the so-called love. But over here, in the sutra, it talked about how the king, in order to receive this teaching, he first offered his son and offered his wife, and he offered his other wealth and belongings, such as the elephant and all the other wealth. We can see that from the different stories of the previous lives of the Buddha, he gave up everything in order to receive the genuine Dharma. And then he continued to say in the verse, saying that, well, as a wise one, why don't you diligently listen to the teaching of the Dharma? Especially when you listen to the teaching on the nature of your mind, then you can transcend the whole suffering of samsara. And that kind of value, how can you even measure it with wealth? Just as it states in the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, it says that because of listening to the genuine Dharma, one can understand the truth, and that is why the wise one should practice diligently and listen diligently to the correct Dharma. In Larungar, I think this is the specialty that we have over here. In fact, whenever people don't listen to the Dharma teachings, the peers won't think them as the great masters who don't have to listen to Dharmas anymore. Rather, people would have the feeling that that person definitely has lots of afflictions. So I really hope that lots of our audience, even if you don't have great health, but if you listen to 1 or 2 classes a day, that would be of great benefit to yourself. So I really hope that don't get too contented with the amount of Dharma that you listen to. The Buddha then continued to say that I have given up everything, including all the elaborations and all the non-dharmas. When the Buddha was practicing at the causal stage, he had given up all of those elaborations and all graspings. Because for hundreds and thousands of kalpas, if one were to grasp onto any of those elaborations, it would be difficult to attain liberation. Therefore, all of you should be delighted because you should aspire for the supreme, subtle, and wonderful Dharma. So one should seek for the genuine Dharma, the Sutrayana, the Tantrayana, all of those teachings. Even when you listen to one sutra, such as the Sutra of the Sixth Platform Sutra, and any of those sutras, you should think about that once I finish listening and studying this teaching, I would definitely go back and I would definitely propagate the teaching. If you don't have a group of audience to propagate those teachings or give those teachings, at least you should practice diligently. So when the causes and conditions matured, then you can start propagating the teaching. This is really important. Just like a worldly merchant, when that merchant goes to an island that is full of treasures, when he comes back with lots of treasures, he would protect those treasures. Similarly, since we've already studied and received the teachings of the Dharma, we should pay great attention to all these Dharma treasures. On one hand, in my lifetime, I've been giving teachings to everyone, and I place great importance in the Dharma teaching. On the other hand, I really place great importance in my translation as well, because I think this is the most important part of my life. I can say that I've transformed my life, my youth, and all my energy into books. So for those of you who have faith and who have interest, they would definitely place great importance, especially if I do not have my life anymore. I really hope that you can place great importance in the books. I think those would be valuable. Maybe they are not, but at least I think they are not harmful to the sentient beings. In my personal memory, I have not wasted lots of time, such as a month or 2 months. I have never been distracted for that much time. I tried my best to use my time on either translation or writing or give teachings. There are times I would do other things, do other practice in order to confess my negative karma. On the other hand, there are definitely some distractions. Anyhow, I really hope that all of you who are listening to this class, we should use this life to seek the genuine teaching of the Dharma. Though we're not like the Buddha that could carve 1,000 holes on his flesh body and then lit them up. We cannot cut our flesh off and give it to the others. We cannot do that. But I believe many of you have already given up a lot as well. Some of you have given up their family and relationship, and many of you staying over here at this high altitude, you have to breathe very... You have to breathe really hardly. On the first floor, second floor, and third floor. So if you want to reach the fourth floor, you have to exalt 3 times of the filthy air. Anyhow, those are what we have to give up in order to gain the Dharma or to study the Dharma. We're living here, we're not beggars. In fact, I understand everyone has different way of living. Some of you probably don't have good support for living, but everyone's kind of similar. We all have to face many kinds of problems and difficulties, such as the high altitude and all different kinds of problems that's going on. But we still have our life. I know that staying here for a long period of time, especially in the winter, it's very difficult. But that's the spirit that we need. Whenever I walk on the road, I see people would breathe very hardly. But they look good, though. So where am I now? I got so sidetracked. If one were to take delight in liberation, are the ones who have obtained the most supreme merit. For such kind of person, one should abandon all kinds of chores, the worldly chores, should not even ask about the worldly chores. Other than the basics of the provision, such as clothing and food. In fact, all the other chores or all the other worldly things are not of any intrinsic meaning, and by pursuing those will not would not attain nirvana. According to some of the teachings, it says that there are heretics that they don't even wear any clothing at all. And there are some others who would have hundreds of clothings. They would try to get more and more clothing, and those are not good either. According to Buddhism, we should try to find the middle way. In fact, the previous great masters, they would wear the clothes that's discarded by the others. Pontsukul Rinpoche, when he was studying in Sershio County, he also would wear clothing that's discarded by the others. Sometimes even from the charnel ground that were the clothing of the deceased ones, they would have to wear those ones as well. In fact, wearing those would need lots of courage, especially the clothing from charnel ground. lots of them would have, in fact, carries a certain disease and so on and so forth. We probably don't even want to touch it, don't even thinking about wearing it. Ponzo Rinpoche also said that sometimes he would go to the charnel ground and take some clothing over there and wash it and would use it as well. That's also a kind of a breakthrough of practice. It shows a sign of practice. If we were to grasp onto clothing, especially when we're already at such a secluded practice area within this practice community, if we were to grasp onto clothing and food, those are not good at all. We should not fall into the two extremes. Of course, we cannot be like the nudists. That probably won't be very dignified, but as the mundane beings nowadays, in the worldly people, I think people have many, even hundreds of shoes and hundreds of clothing. This is in fact quite extravagant. It's not necessary either. I know many poor children nowadays, they would die of deprivation. At the same time, we're just squandering away our merits. We should definitely cherish whatever we have. Since we should not cherish food or clothing, what should we cherish? What should we praise? One should praise all the great bhikshus. Also invite them to sit on nicely arranged seatings so that they would share the different teachings. That's what the Buddha said next. Well, great bhikshu, would you please come here and give us some teachings? What did this sutra talk about and what did the other sutra talked about? So you should invite the bhikshus to sit on the cushions to share their dharma. The Dharma teachings. There's a sutra where it talked about there are the two kinds of actions that's meritorious. The first one is meditate together. The second one is talking about the correct Dharma. Ananda also talked about if two people want to create merits together, the best way would be one of them giving teaching and the other one listening. That would be the best. And the worst would be one getting angry and the other one start to fight. So that would be the worst. And then the Buddha continued to say that the human birth is difficult to gain. One should try one's best to practice the virtuous Dharma. Chanting, recitation, meditation, those are the practices one should practice. We all know that it's very difficult to gain a human birth, so we should try our best to practice the virtuous Dharma. Let it be chanting mantra or reading, reciting. I do notice lots of our fellow Sangha members are quite diligent. Let it be recitation or preparation for exams or serving the Sangha, serving the sentient beings. I really think lots of our fellow practitioners use their time on those meaningful things. I've quoted from the Treasury of Wish Fulfilling Jewel. I'm not sure if you've forgotten this. Anyhow, it means that you should try to taste all different kinds of flavors of Dharma based on your connection and your faith. For example, there are people who really enjoy eating. Those foodies, they would love trying all different kinds of food. They would say, this was good, that was good. I want to try this, I want to try that. In fact, as a genuine practitioner, should either practice diligently and single-mindedly, focus only on one practice, or one could be genuinely interested in all kinds of Dharma practices and being very interested in accumulating virtue in all kinds of the virtuous deeds. So practitioners one should try their best to accumulate virtuous merit. Over here, the Buddha said that let it be chanting or meditation or asking questions and seeking for truth. All of those should be done by the genuine practitioners. In fact, life is very impermanent. We don't have that much time. Look around. We see practitioners who suffer from illness, and some said that they don't sleep well, some said that they don't eat well, some said that their spine is not good. What's your illness? Yes? You do? You look good though. It's hard to say when we're going to lose our human body. While we still have this skin, why don't we use it to try to practice virtue? When your body is healthy, you should be able to eat whatever you can. So we should not give ourselves to the different kinds of boundaries, saying that, oh, I should not practice this, I should not practice that. In fact, we should try our best to encourage the others to practice virtue. When others say that, I want to practice this, can I do that? You'd say, very good, that's really excellent, I rejoice. That's what you should do. According to words of my perfect teacher, it says that I forgot how I translated this. Not that one.
那个是好，下面就是讲，如来这个佛陀说是如来将来会涅槃的，这个依法的。
The Buddha will pass into parinirvana, and the Dharma will also diminish. So the Buddha started talking about in the Dark Ages. At the time, after the Buddha passed into parinirvana, the Dharma will slowly diminish, and the bhikshus will indulge in all kinds of distractions. They would take delights in distraction and entertainment, and then give up practicing in peace. In fact, this is the prediction given by the Buddha on the Dark Ages. Now we can see that there are less and less monastics, and people's actions are getting more and more inappropriate or less in accord with the Dharma. And then the Buddha continued to say that the foolish ones, even in dreams, they would have all kinds of worldly dreams. For example, the worldly people would dream of the stock market or having business, all of those. In one's dream, there would be all kinds of fear and worry and sorrow that would happen. After knowing that one had violated many precepts, one would definitely be reborn in the three lower realms. There's a sutra once said that if one were to be in distraction at all times, the mind is constantly abiding at vice, which would lead to be reborn in the three lower realms. As practitioners, however, one should generate the mind of joyfulness, take delights to abide in quiet places. One should feel really happy about practicing in secluded areas. According to the Tibetan version, where it says that one should be like the rhinos, because the rhinos they would travel alone and they're not traveling in crowds. I think according to the Sui dynasty also has such a metaphor. One should not see the faults of the others and consider self as the most supreme, as arrogance is only be indulgence. One should not take the inferior lightly. In fact, the so-called inferiors, slowly they will also gain liberation in the Dharma of the future times. We should not look down at anyone, though there are people who may appear not to be really good people, but everyone has Buddha nature. And with such kind of treasure hidden in their minds, then slowly and slowly they will gain liberation. Just like when people don't get good grades in exams, we should not look down at them. In fact, maybe they're just pretending. Maybe they're the manifestation of manjushri. But also, don't try to get the lowest grades. Don't pretend to be manjushri either. Everyone's different, so we should respect that. The bhikshus, though, have broken their vows. However, if they still have deep faith to the three jewels, that could also plant a seed of liberation. And one should not seek faults in the bhikshus who had violated their vows. It is unnecessary to seek faults of the others. According to Shantideva, he said that one would rather violate Shila, that is precept. One should not destroy the right view. There are people who may have violated their precepts. Well, of course, the supervisors of the Sangha or the manager of the Sangha, they can talk about this because that's their responsibility. But the other people who's not really in charge of the Sangha, in charge of the regulation of the Sangha, then it would be best not to talk about those at all. Over here, it says that even if one had violated the Shila, the precepts, it doesn't necessarily mean that person have given up the right view. According to the 10 Chakra Sutra of Kshitigarbha, it says that though one has violated the precepts, it would not forbidden one to attain liberation. If one were to give up completely on all the vicious view, one will swiftly attain parinirvana. According to the requirement of the Sangha, the ones who had to break their precepts cannot live with the Sangha anymore. But of course, that's from the angle of strictly taking the regulation of the whole Sangha. But on the other hand, we should use the pure mind and the pure perception to look at everyone. According to the Mind Contemplation Sutra, it also says that though violated the precepts, not breaking one's right view, with such cause and condition, such kind of monastic can still be named as the merit field. As long as such kind of monastics still have right view, still have faith towards the three jewels, still have the correct view towards the karma, cause and conditions, then that kind of monastic still are considered as the object that is worthy to receive offering. Different sutras have different perspective. So we should look at the Buddha's teaching from various angles. That's why we should listen and study extensively. The Buddha continued to say that it indeed is very difficult to destroy anger and desire. Therefore, one should not be surprised if others would indulge into their old habitual patterns. So do not get so surprised and think, oh, why did he do that? Why did he do this? In fact, everyone's habitual patterns are difficult to uproot. Therefore, it is best not to talk about others' faults. It is not that simple. There are the monastics, in fact, may have violated some of those mistakes, but as the other people or the lay practitioners, we should not speak ill of the others. There are people who may seem to be quite mad, but maybe that person have already completely realized the nature of the Dharma. That could be possible. So we should not speak of the faults of the others. Because the other person may have already taken some other precepts, maybe the manifestation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, maybe have already fully attained enlightenment. That if we were to speak ill of those people, then what awaits for us would be quite devastating karmic retribution. The last one says that as a pure bhikshu, one should not seek the faults of the others. Otherwise, one would not be considered as a genuine practitioner because one is not practicing the genuine Dharma. If you were a true practitioner, it would be the best for you to look at yourself rather than talking about the others or seek faults in the others. A genuine practitioner would not do that. And then the Buddha said that the bhikshus who seek the path, one should then give up ill speech towards others. One should take delight in practicing in secluded areas. We should not talk ill about others. We should eradicate completely about vice speech, or at least decrease such kind of speech. There are people who really like to talk about the faults of the others. After studying this teaching, at least you should stop that, and maybe you can chant the Bodhisattva mantra. When people ask you what's happening, you would say, oh, no, nothing, and then continue with your mantra. So that really shows you're using right mindfulness to taming your own mind. We all should use happiness. We should take delights and joyfulness in every day. Do not feel unhappy about this and unhappy about that tomorrow, unhappy about your health and unhappy about others. This is not good. What we should do is rather abide in secluded areas and practice in peaceful environments. And we can then look at our own mind. Even if we are staying in a really chaotic crowd, if we can watch our mind, we are considered as practicing retreats in deep mountains. At that time, Maitreya then replied to Buddha saying that, how rare, world-honored one, such rare teachings. I think many of us also felt this is quite rare as well. After knowing that distraction could lead to such kinds of vice, the mistakes that could lead to the loss of merits could increase one's affliction and fall into the three lower realms to depart from the virtuous deeds. So, after hearing those, why wouldn't the Bodhisattvas seek the virtuous Dharma? Why wouldn't they take delight to practice in secluded areas? After listening to this, knowing that such kinds of faults would increase if one were distracted. Of course, the genuine practitioners would seek virtue. They would take delight to practice in secluded areas. Now we've finished the 20 faults that could be found in distraction.
Tonani be jana pamshi chang kirga nan chi ralong chubai chubum sonen roa